Let's take a look at our vocals now and see what we're doing on vocal channels. And I'm doing some pretty interesting things here, some different stuff. And I'll try to explain what I'm doing, the philosophy of what I've got going on, and hopefully this will be helpful. You guys can work on this and learn and experiment with some things and make those vocals sound pretty good. So one of the first things you'll notice when you look at my vocals is I have two channels for every vocal. So I have a dry channel, if you will, so each vocal comes in dry, and then I have each one of them double patched so that it's coming in on a second channel. And I'm doing some different processing on that channel. So we call that a smash. And if you want to learn more about that, there's a lot of videos online that different people, some mix-u groups and other people have done some really neat tutorials on how to do this. But basically it's taking that vocal and you're going to compress the heck out of it. So if you look at this compressor while that vocal is running, you're going to see a lot of compression, sometimes upwards of 10 dBs of compression. So it's just squashing the heck out of that, taking all the dynamic life out of it. So it's not something you want to do on your main vocal because there's no dynamics. They can't sing loud or soft. It's always going to be the same volume. But I use that in a couple different ways. And so let me talk about the philosophy of what I'm doing there, and I'll show you how I set up each one of those. So typically what I do in general, and again, there's always exceptions to this and do different things, but in general, whatever I've got on the lead, I'm going to use their dry channel primarily. And so I'm going to take that channel, so in this particular case, if vocal 1 was my lead, I'm going to bring their dry channel in, take their smash channel out. If vocal 2 is singing background, I'm going to bring their smash channel in. And I'm going to use their smash channel for background vocals, for that background vocal. And it does a couple things for me. It allows my lead vocal to be on top, to have the dynamics, to have the life in the mix and all that kind of stuff. And it keeps my background vocals in check. And so I can bring them in. I'm not having to ride the fader a lot to get them balanced and, how much harmony I want for that lead. I just want it to support. I don't want it to override the lead. And so that gives me a little bit more control over that to have that smash channel in there. Now sometimes I will actually use some of that smash channel as well on that lead vocal. So maybe their voice is a little bit thin, maybe it's a really rangy song where they've got to go way down really low, and then they're going to come up and just belt at you with a jump an octave or two to give you something way up there. So in that case, I'll use some of that smash channel in that lead vocal as well. So when they go down low, I've got this smash channel in there. It's been compressed, but it's still got, it's that solid foundation. I'm not losing the volume there. I can layer that in, and that keeps the intensity. It keeps them there, and even though I've lost them off of that, they're not singing very loud at that low volume, at that low register on the regular channel, I still have enough of them in there, and I haven't lost them in the mix. People can still hear them. They can still sing with them. They know what the melody is and so forth. So I'll use that smash channel for them. So I'll bring some of that in as well. So I'll layer some of that in. So I'll layer that in as I need it. So that's what I've got going on there in the background with those smash channels. So the other thing that you'll notice on the smash channels, in terms of EQ, what I try to do on the main vocal channel is EQ them to sound natural. And there's always this debate: do you make your vocals sound natural, like their natural voice, or do you make them sound good? And sometimes that's the same thing, and sometimes it isn't. And so I do a little bit of both. We have some vocalists that are naturally just very beautiful voices, and so I'm basically doing enough EQ to compensate for what the microphone is doing to their voice, trying to get it back to their natural tone. And we have some other vocals, for instance, some of our male vocalists who are very muddy voice. It's still a beautiful voice. They're very tonally very good vocalists, but because of that, a lot of that low frequency information, when it goes into a mix, it just muddies up the mix. And so I'll do some things to kind of brighten their voice up, probably brighter than they normally sing, but I need that in the mix. So I'm doing a little bit of both of that. I try not to actually change their voice or change their voice quality any more than I have to, but sometimes you got to do a little bit of that to make it work in the mix. All right. Now, the other thing you'll notice on my smash channels, that's the EQ on the main channels, just kind of make them sound good, make them natural. On the smash channels, you'll see that I have them EQ'd really dark. So I've taken a lot of the high frequencies out. Those high mids, I'm pulling it down. That's where you get a lot of that definition in there. I've taken the high frequencies clear off. And what I want is kind of a darker, I don't want that background vocal to stick out too much. It allows me to get a balance in there of that background vocal that you're hearing the harmonies, but if they're a little pitchy or something like that, that they're not hitting you on that edge, and if they're out of tune a little bit, it doesn't sound nearly as bad. And so by smashing them down like that, I still have the harmonies, and I can still ride them in and make them sound really rich and thick and beautiful, but it still leaves that lead vocal out on top so everybody can hear the melody, everybody knows what's going on. So I darken those up, so those smash channels are typically very dark. Move that high pass filter way up, move that filter in from the right, and just take a lot of those high mids out of there. So that's typically what I do there. Now let's look at effects a little bit of what I'm doing on the effects channels. So I have 3 effects that I run. There's a hall reverb, a plate reverb, and a delay. So the hall reverb just kind of gives you that echoey, I'm in a big room and stuff like that. The plate is a little different, kind of a shimmery type of an effect, and then the delay is your echo. So when you hear something and then hear it over and over and kind of hear it echo coming back there. So I use all 3 of those in different ways. So typically on my lead vocal, I'm going to use the plate and the delay. So you'll see on my main channels, on my dry channels, my uncompressed channels, I'm going to have that plate and the delay on, and those vocals are going in there. What I found is that plate has a tendency to make that vocal stand out, so it kind of brings it out on top of the mix without having to ride the fader up and put a lot more energy in the mix. So it can actually, without having to make it loud, I can make it be on top of the mix, make it be heard with that plate effect. That delay gives me some, really some texture to it. And especially if you got a ballad, we got a song that starts soft with just a piano and a vocal, I use a lot of that delay, and you can actually kind of hear that echo, and it makes it sound ethereal, it makes it sound really neat. And so I'll play with that delay. I'm using that delay in and out a lot. And part of that also comes in with the tap tempo over here and how fast you tap that in. So on some of those, ballady, slow songs, I'll tap this out to the beat, so 1 to the quarter note, and then you'll hear that delay coming out. And then on other places, I'll tap it to the 8th note. I'll double tap it, double time tap that, and then that gives me a delay that's a lot shorter, kind of a slap delay they call it. And you won't actually hear the echoes, but it just still gives you some of that depth and everything, and kind of makes it pretty interesting. So that's typically what I have on my lead vocal, is that plate. Now you'll see on my smash channel, then I will typically put a hall reverb on that smash channel and use that for my background vocal. So a hall effect tends to want to push things back into the mix. Instead of bringing them out, it tends to want to push them back in the mix. So that's kind of what I want to do, is push those background vocals back into the mix, make them part of the band and part of the background that's going on. So that hall effect will tend to do that. And so I have that hall on there. And so, and I can do a lot of different things then. So again, if I've got a lead vocal and I really want this ethereal and a soft part of the song, and I've got this lead vocal coming up, and I've got, a lot of plate, I've got this delay echoing, and I can even thicken it up more and just bring that smash channel in with that hall reverb on it, and that gives me a little bit more effects. It kind of layers them on and just kind of really makes it thick and mysterious kind of sounding and stuff like that. At times, and in fact this past mix that I just did, I would actually use this smash channel without the hall, so I would turn that hall off because I didn't want any more effects, but I need a little bit more support for that vocal. I needed some of that beef in the middle to kind of to strengthen it, and so I'll take that hall off and play with it like that. So sometimes I take it off and add it into my lead vocal, but typically what I'm doing is, again, going back and forth. So whoever's on lead, I'm going to throw their main channel up. That channel is going to have the plate and a delay on it. The background vocal, as it comes up, when they're singing background, I take that main down and bring that smash channel up. It's got the hall reverb, which is kind of what I want to blend those vocals in the background. So that's what I'm doing there. I'll talk one more thing about panning. So I'm actually doing a little bit of panning. You don't want to pan in our worship center because that rig is way too wide, and you start panning vocals, you're going to lose them. You're only going to hear them on one side of the room. But in your mix, this can help you really get some separation. So typically when I've got a male lead and two females singing background, I'll do a fair amount of panning on those vocals. So I'll take one of those vocals and move it off to the left, you know, as much as on our dial here, 15 to 20 is what they're as the numbers that they use. So I'll move them off to the left and I'll move the other one off to the right that much. And that gives you some separation so you can hear the vocal in one ear or the other ear. And it's not so much that they're like sounding like they're way over there, but it allows your brain, as you're listening on headphones or on stereo speakers or something at home, to differentiate between those two vocalists. And again, we got some background vocalists that are really tight, and when they get tight, they kind of almost start sounding like one voice, and that gives you a little bit of separation on the different pitches and everything, and it's really neat to do that. So I'll do some panning. Typically, I'm going to keep my lead vocal down the center. Though is typically what I do. Now, this past week, I only had two vocalists. I had one male and one female, and so I just did a real slight pan, so 5 to 10, no more than that. Put one on one side, the other one on the other side. Again, just give me a little bit of separation, a little bit of differentiate between them without making it sound like they're really separated on one side or the other. So I'll do some of that. So we'll play with the panning in the broadcast mix. Again, you're not going to want to do this on our rig in the front of house, but on the broadcast mix. That can help you to get some definition and be able to hear those vocals, and have, you know, makes it easier to mix, I think, to be able to get them balanced, because you can kind of hear what they're doing and hear the better separation there. So that's kind of a quick hoedown of what I'm doing with the vocals and what I'm trying to accomplish there to be able to get them. Again, the philosophy is that lead vocal out on top. You want those background vocals in behind, but you want them supporting them.